PokeClass is sponsored by CollectorsCash.com, and they now have Dark Explorers in stock at incredible prices. Are you looking for that last card to complete your deck, or looking to boost your collection in any set of the game? Then Collector's Cash is where you need to be. They stock all of your boxes, tins, and singles of Pokemon, and any other card game for that matter, at very competitive prices. So make sure you visit www.collectorscash.com after the show. Hey everybody, as you can see I've been doing a lot of testing, but I don't really know what to choose, to be honest. Could have a bit of Celebi, maybe risk a bit of Vileplume, Tornado CX, maybe? I don't really know. As you can see, I have no idea what to play whatsoever. But hopefully, this episode will be able to help you out. Welcome to PokeClass episode 76, and today we'll be going over what to play for upcoming Nationals events including the US, UK and Canada. So the 2012 season is coming to a close, but is ready to go out with a bang like every year, with Nationals and Worlds, the biggest tournaments of the year, left to play in the UK, US and Canada. Last week I went over how the Battle Roads results were looking, but Nationals could look a little bit different because a lot is on the line, the tournaments are bigger and there's a lot more at stake. Don't get me wrong, the results will make an impact on what was being played, and this episode is going to pretty much sum up all of what I've been talking about in PokeClass for the last few months in one bite-sized chunk, so you can do the most revision for Nationals. Let's start off with what has won Nationals across the globe already, since we actually have most of the results, and this is what they look like. So out of 14 different Nationals, obviously not including those that are held before Dark Explorers was released, Darkrai sitting on the top of the table, CMT in a safely second, and a couple of quad Terrakion guys come in third for the winning decks. So what shouldn't be a surprise to you is that Darkrai has won the majority of the events so far, and even with US, UK and Canadian Nationals taken into consideration after next week, it still will have. But what is quite interesting is the breakdown of the decks within the variants that have won, and it looks something like this. As you can see, the amount of Darkrai decks that won the most within the variants are the ones that included Terrakion, which I find quite interesting since it shows how much of an impact Darkrai has had on Nationals before the tournaments even started, with a lot of people running a tech against it already because of how well it achieved at Battle Roads. There are a lot of ways to run Darkrai at the moment, and out of that 9 that won Nationals, there are 4 different variants, all with slightly different ideas to approach the game, but all revolving around Darkrai. If you haven't seen last week's episode of PokeClass, then please click the link at the end of the show to find out more about Darkrai Tornadus, and specifically Darkrai with Sableye, aptly nicknamed Hammer Time at the moment. That episode includes a lot of information about it, so I won't go over it now, but what I will go over in a little bit more detail today is Darkrai Terrakion. Here's a quick list I've put together which should look pretty standard for building your own version of or testing against when prepping for Nationals. There is quite a heavy focus Terrakion in this version, even though there are only 2 copies of it, since Terrakion does take a lot of deck space in the trainer column so that it can work to its full potential. The main notes are cards like Energy Search, Super Rod and Shaman from Unleashed, all cards which are going to aid you in getting your Terrakion out when you need it the most. Energy Search is probably the main player in getting your Terrakion out, since you're going to have to play Fighting Energy, and when you have Terrakion on your hand and you're ready to use it, Energy Search is there so you can obtain the Fighting Energy yourself, rather than having to gamble through Shuffle Draw supporters. Since you can also use it with Junkarn whenever you need to get another Terrakion on the field, it's just a great asset to have when making the most of your techs in the mirror. It's also not bad to have when you're missing out on some Dark Energy too. Other than that, the list is quite usual for a Darkrai list, just minus the Tornado CX, since you'd play this if you're expecting less fighting based decks and more mirror matches. I would test against this version of the deck a lot if you're still preparing for Nationals or haven't done so already, as this will be a very popular choice in the upcoming tournaments, definitely one to watch out for. And sticking with the whole Terrakion hype, we have CMT including Terrakion winning 2 out of the 3 tournaments that CMT took as a whole, meaning that this fighting bull is ready to take it to the metagame right now and gives means to test against it a whole lot whether you're playing Darkrai, Zeals or anything else. I would argue that CMT can handle Terrakion the best in a list, since it takes less components to actually get onto the field, and is designed to have a way to retreat the active anyway after manipulating energy, so not too much deck tweaking is required. Of course, but putting Terrakion in, you are sacrificing a bit of consistency against matchups you can't make use of Terrakion in, but that's the risk you take when catering for techs in your lists. Here is another list for you, this time placing Terrakion into CMT to make your Darkrai, and possibly more importantly your Zekromeals matchup a little bit better. The same kind of cards are involved, the main one being Energy Search, but I've also managed to squeeze a Shaman in from Unleashed, like the previous list, since I feel it can bring on surprise land crushes when fighting energy has already been placed elsewhere. I didn't include Super Rod in this since CMT is a very aggressive deck that can take a lot of cheap prizes early on, so Terrakion was used more of a beat stick that can happily get KO'd the turn after being used, than as a hefty attacker in the Darkrai version. I did go over the original CMT and PokeClass episode 74 by going over how it has changed within the release of Dark Explorers, and included a list for you to test against or pilot yourself too, so click in the centre of your screen now if you want to do some CMT revision. I would highly recommend that episode if you also want to go over some Zekromeals, because even though it hasn't won any nationals yet, it has top 4'd a lot, and as I mentioned earlier, watch out for it and definitely test against it. The last deck of the 3 that has won national championships already features, you guessed it, Terrakion, again. Terrakion is making a ridiculously huge impact at nationals so far, and all because the fighting weak decks would be threatening to take over the format otherwise. However, I really don't think Terrakion would be making such an appearance in decks at nationals, and winning ones as well, because nationals is a huge tournament where consistency usually wins out, not something that Terrakion gives to any deck. That being said, 9 of the 14 decks that have won nationals already have featured Terrakion as a tech, or in this very deck, which is Quad Terrakion, still taking tournaments by storm since its debut at States. I usually do prefer the deck with Groudon EX as it covered in an early PokeClass episode, but Quad Terrakion seems to be what people are winning with at the moment, and here's a list I've put together for it. Now I know I've strayed ever so slightly from the Quad Terrakion idea, but this deck needs Mewtwo to function properly. Many players have lessened their counts of Mewtwo to around 1 or 2 copies, but just one Mewtwo set up to one-hit KO all of your Terrakions on one hit will cause you a huge amount of problems, which is why I feel it definitely needs it. Other than that, the list should be what you expect, with Experience Share being the main form of energy acceleration, and Terrakion being the main guy you want to be attacking with. On a side note, I would also like to put Shaman in here too, since it really works well with a Mewtwo that you don't run double colorless for, meaning you don't have to have it sitting around, hoping to avoid the KO before you can use it yourself. Quad Terrakion is proving to still be quite the force out there and really does show how much fighting weak Pokemon are taking an impact on the format, since a deck with just 4 fighting Pokemon can rip through them all. However, Quad Terrakion will struggle against the likes of CMT and decks that don't want fighting weak attackers, so feel free to move over to a build with Groudon EX to give a little bit more punch against the rest of the metagame, while still keeping that hold over Zekrom and Darkrai. And that's pretty much all you need to know about every kind of deck that should be at your national championships next weekend. If you watch this video combined with PokeClass episode 74, which you can view at the end of the episode, you should have all the info you need to do enough testing against every deck with some ready-made lists to go with that. So what I'm going to leave you with are my top 5 tips for preparing for nationals. Number 1 is to make sure you've tested against the big 3, which are Darkrai, CMT and Zekromeals. Even though Zekromeals hasn't won any national championships just yet, it is still banking top 4 a hell of a lot, so do watch out for this one. If you only have time to cram in some testing after choosing your nationals deck, then make sure it's against these 3 at least 10 times so you can get a feel of how your deck needs to work against theirs. 10 times is by no means enough, but it's a lot better than going into a matchup completely blind. Number 2 is that even if you don't have the cards to build all 3 decks above and even more, proxy them all. I have a few decks that are completely proxies, just so I can test against them with the people I play with. I know a few people that are not testing enough because they don't have the cards to build the decks, or their friends don't have any of the decks, but proxy them all and play against them. You don't need to print them out in full colour, you could even draw them, as long as you know what they do, they should be good enough for testing. Number 3 is make sure you test against the clock. Swiss rounds will be single games with 30 minutes plus 3 turns rules, so grab a timer either on your watch or on an app, on your phone or computer or wherever, and play it to every time you play. Also practice a top cut format of best of 3 games in an hour time frame, since it's very difficult to fit 3 full games into just 60 minutes, so you need to practice when to realise the game is out of your reach to skip on to the next one with enough time to win. Remember, you do now have to take at least 4 prizes for a game to count, so this is more important than ever now. Either way, make sure you practice to a clock, as it can sometimes be a huge factor in the outcome of a long game. Number 4 is stay consistent. In most cases, Nationals is a very large tournament. In the US, it can reach 9 or 10 Swiss rounds with a top 128 cut, and if you're planning on reaching the finals, then that's a lot of rounds to get through. Now teching is something that has won players around the globe national championships already, seeing as most ran Terrakion, but consistency is always going to be a number one factor when it comes to the larger events. You're never going to be able to cover up every matchup consistently, and if you're worrying about a deck that could come up but isn't going to be that popular, I would much rather take my chances and include an outrageous tech that will ruin my deck's consistency. Some people love techs, but I believe consistency will win more times than not. And finally, number 5 is be prepared and have fun, since that is what the game is all about. Even the best players doing well at nationals are going to need some luck, and it might just not be your day, but make the most of what you can in preparing for it to give yourself the highest chance possible. Simple things like getting enough sleep for the long day ahead and staying hydrated throughout the event can keep your brain in top functioning condition for the rest of the day, so make sure you keep on top of all of these and you should be in for a great day. And that's pretty much all I have for you today, and next week, probably out on the Monday because of Nats being on the Saturday for me, will be my last covering the Heart Gold and Soul Silver onwards format, since we'll be saying goodbye to it soon after. My focus will switch to Black and White on and what we've got to look forward to in the new set as well. For those of you who have your nationals still left to play, then I wish you all good luck and I hope to see you all at UK Nats on Saturday. I'll be sure to let you all know how I get on next week for those of you who won't be there. Good luck, make sure you rate, comment and subscribe as usual, and make sure you have a great weekend.